This may be a surprise to a lot of people, but I'm actually not really a Taylor Swift fan. And I know that's shocking because I look like her target audience, but nah, her music just isn't my style. But either way, I do find this whole subject interesting just for the fact that it's a concert movie that's going to be released theatrically. And it's poised to be one of the biggest box office openings within this last year, and not for concert movies, but I mean, just for movies in general. Right now, I have this article from Variety talking about it. Taylor Swift Era Tour film surpasses $100 million in advance ticket sales. And the reason I find this interesting is because there's potential ramifications on movie theaters moving forward with this. So this article is saying how it has $100 million, and that's the worldwide in advance ticket sales. It's being distributed by AMC Theaters, and there's still tickets available on Fandango. The movie is going to be released this following Friday. That's October 13th, and it's to coincide with the pop star's lucky number, according to this article. And it's going to be released in 8,500 cinemas across 100 countries. Now, if you don't know about theatrical releases, the 8,500 cinemas is an insane amount of cinemas that it's going to be opening in. Usually, some of these big budget like Marvel movies are released in like 3,000 cinemas, something along that line, maybe 3,500. Avengers Endgame, that was their biggest opening for a Marvel movie, and that was like 4,600 cinemas. So, I mean, 8,500 across 100 countries is ridiculous. Now, to be fair, though, a lot of these cinemas are small ones in other countries, so they're not necessarily going to bring in a huge amount of money. But I mean, just the simple number alone, I mean, you're just releasing them in a lot of places, so it's going to generate some good revenue. But it's saying in this article, by the time it is actually opening this next Friday, it could hit $100 million in just North America. So as you can see, I mean, domestically, or at least in North America it goes, that's US, Canada, it's going to be making the bulk of its money. And that also means it's so far it's one of only 5 other movies that actually released to $100 million opening. And the others were Barbie, Super Mario Brothers, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumanium. Now, I will point out, though, that Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumanium was also a movie that did lose money for the studio, despite the fact that it had a solid opening, just because it cost so much to produce that. But this Taylor Swift concert was a relatively cheap production. I think I saw figures it was like $10 to $20 million that it cost to produce this. And of course, because that was basically just them filming her concert and then editing it. I mean, that's obviously grossly oversimplifying what went into making this. But still, I mean, it's relatively cheap to produce something like this versus making a movie like Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumanium. So that's why something like this, it's a cheap investment, and it's obviously going to make its money back. And if you look at the website, the numbers for concert movies in history, or I mean, this is also stand-up specials and things like that, but I mean, just concert event type things that are released theatrically. 2011's Justin Bieber Never Say Never was the one that made the most money, and that had a $26 million domestic opening and just under $100 million worldwide gross. Now, I'm not sure entirely if this is adjusted for inflation, but if you adjusted this, or if this isn't and you adjust it for inflation, that's $135 million roughly global take. So, I mean, obviously this Taylor Swift one is going to surpass this and end up being the #1 concert movie of all time. But of course, she's also one of the biggest music stars in the world, so that makes sense. One thing I am curious about this Taylor Swift one is just the second weekend box office drop to it, because this Justin Bieber one, I'm using this as kind of like something like almost like a metric to go by, because we don't know what's going to happen with it. But when you saw this Justin Bieber one, it had its opening, and then its second weekend it had a 69% drop off. So I mean, obviously quite a significant one, and I expect something similar for this Taylor Swift one, where you're going to have all her fans. Because I mean, if I was a Taylor Swift fan, I'd probably go out to see it too, because if you can't see a concert, the next best thing is to see it in a crowded auditorium or something like that. I mean, I think they're even kind of marketing it that way, and that makes perfect sense. So you're probably going to get a lot of her fans turning this into an event. They're going to dress up and put on their Taylor Swift stuff, go to the theaters and watch it with the crowd that are huge Taylor Swift fans. So I mean, that seems like the smart thing to do. And then maybe the second weekend, it's like, probably going to have a huge drop off. Because I mean, yeah, you're going to get some people who are kind of coming back to see it again. But a lot of the people, I mean, it's not like other movies where like, I'm going to wait for good word of mouth to see whether I'm going to see it in theaters. Because if you're not a Taylor Swift fan, you're not going to be convinced because of reviews or anything like that. I mean, it's literally just made for her fans. And for her, she has a lot of fans. So yeah, she's going to make a huge box office penny from this when it gets released. Not only for her, but just for AMC theaters in general, since they're distributing it. But either way, I mean, having a steep drop off doesn't really matter. I mean, they're going to make some money moving forward. I mean, like the Justin Bieber one, you see it was just under $30 million domestic opening, and it made around $73 million domestically when it was all said and done. So, I mean, this Taylor Swift one, they probably could just release it in like for one weekend only. But I mean, I guess if you could squeeze a little bit more money out of it, then all the better, I take it. But the reason I think there's future ramifications for theaters moving forward is because within this last year, we've seen a lot of poor performance from movies coming out of these major studios. I mean, with lots of flops, theaters obviously get some money, but I mean, and it's sustaining them because of from what they're getting, but at the same time, they're not doing fantastic. And then we got these strikes that have gone on. It's has these downstream effects of it. Not only is it delaying the production of a lot of things, but then moving forward, there's going to be large gaps of space where there's not a whole lot of stuff being released in theaters. And that could really hurt the theaters when they don't have stuff to show. And that's why I think certain things like this, I mean, you're going to see maybe theaters not only distributing it like AMC, but maybe just financing the production of it as well. And I'm not saying theaters are going to be production houses, but I mean, but we're probably going to see things like this where they're going to pay to distribute concerts and other event movies just so they have something to put out in the theaters. And then the studios, on the other hand, they're probably going to be re-releasing some of their more classic movies. I mean, Disney has already announced they're going to do that, and they periodically do this already. But I think they're more incentivized to do this now because they're going to have these big production calendars where they're going to have like gaps in it and nothing to show. And it's like, well, it costs very little to re-release something in the theater. And if it's a movie that people really like, then maybe that could be good for the studio just to put it out there, just to kind of fill up some space and make some money in the meantime. Even if it's not a ton, it's some money. The theaters are obviously going to be okay with this because they're making something out of it, and they're going to have empty auditoriums if they didn't do this anyway. So yeah, you might as well. So I mean, maybe this is the potential ramifications for the Taylor Swift Eras concert tour going to theaters, because I mean, it just goes to show you don't need to have current movies that have these huge productions to actually make money for not only studios that are making it, but for theaters that are showing it. Like it can just be anything, just as long as it's something that people want to see. And that's what I think that especially studios need to take away from this. Just give people something that they want to see, and they will come out to see it. Don't try to reinvent the wheel with what they're doing with a lot of their movies out there. I mean, because I mean, that's just trying to overcomplicate things. I mean, even if they're not going to necessarily make a ton of money on something, they can still make more than what they've been doing at the box office, which has actually been losing a lot of money. But at least that's what I think about all this. Let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. And if you like this video, make sure you click that like button, share the video, and subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with the latest news. Thank you.